Well, welcome everybody. Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to our Big Fish expert interview in November. And today's theme is modern masculinity. And we have a fantastic guest today, Kenny. Kenny, the man whisperer. I'm going to talk to you in just a minute about what that means. A very brief introduction to our expert interviews if you haven't been before. So Inga is also here and she's supporting us today in the chat. Um, we established the Big Fish Academy in last November. It was about a year ago exactly. Yes, so we're celebrating our anniversary this month, and we did it because we identified a gap in the market, which was diversity and inclusion training for people who are involved in diversity and inclusion. So either managers or champions or people who have an interest in embedding it in their companies and organizations. But we both come from our own D&I consultancies, and so we've merged our knowledge to offer you some training and expertise from our guest speakers as well. The expert interviews, this is a series that we've been running to great success all year long, offers expert views on a number of different topics. They've been very popular, and we're continuing with them next year as well, so there will be a number of them. They're the ones that everyone's welcome to join because they're free of charge, so I hope to see many of you again next year in this. And as I said, this is not just an interview, it's actually a conversation. So we will be looking for your views, your questions. Please pop them all into the chat as we go on, and Kenny will answer as many questions as we can handle in 1 hour. And you've also obviously submitted a lot of questions in advance, so that's what will guide us through the conversation today. And this particular session is focuses on modern masculinity, and that is also to mark International Men's Day that took place last week. So, as a first question that I will put to Kenny, but I also want to ask everybody else is, put in the chat, did you know that there was International Men's Day last week? And if so, how did you mark it? Did you mark it in your organization in any way? So please put your answers in the chat. And I'm going to start with Kenny. Let's answer that question first. Did you mark International Men's Day? And if so, how?
Actually, let me show you Exhibit A. This is a cardboard cutout of my ebook that I launched on International Men's Day, it's called Online Men's Group Success. I've been holding men's groups for about 20 odd years. But the tools in the ebook are all about communication. They're all about listening. They're all about open questions. They're about reflective listening, inclusion. So it's, for me, so I launched the ebook, and in the evening we held a men's group, and it was about celebrating ourselves as men, celebrating the men in our lives that have caused us goodness as well as badness, because I recognize that I generally learn lessons through pain. They're the ones I can't pretend never happened. And when I unlearn whatever the pain caused, whatever it was that caused the pain, I generally pick up a life tool. So we celebrated ourselves, the most influential men in our lives, and we celebrated our relationships. So that's how we marked it. But then that was a special International Men's Day event. We've been holding men's groups every day since November and every weekday since lockdown, because the necessity to speak things out and be heard, not only when we're locked up with COVID, but generally in our lives. So we engage with each other, people know where we are, and we can all work together. It's just worth its weight in gold.
Totally, I agree, and that's excellent. And I want to learn more about what you do in the men's groups and how to perhaps form them in a work environment elsewhere. But let me ask you first, how did you get that term, that title, the man whisperer? What do you whisper?
You know, if I came up with it, I'd be too shy to use it anyway. Newsweek wrote a cover story article about men and mental health and suicide. So I was the only non-doctor who they interviewed, and I thought, great, I might get a little something. I didn't know that they were writing a book, and they wrote a chapter about my work with men. And they called me the man whisperer in that chapter. And I thought, oh my God, that is so amazing as well as embarrassing. And do I have to go around whispering because I can make a lot of noise? And it's like, so I copyrighted it and I've used it ever since.
It's fantastic. Fantastic. So what kind of things do you whisper then?
For me, it's about asking questions, because I believe that together there's so much information, more than that, so much experience that we can all draw from. And for me, it's like my addiction is learning and growing and seeing. It's like I'm Columbo, really, more than the man whisperer. Life always provides clues, and I need to notice the clues and follow what feels right, and notice the ones that feel comfortable, because it's the same old story and I know how to survive that. So for me, it's about where are people and where is the growth potential? Where is the expression potential? Where is there space for more authenticity and love rather than more masks and fear? And I guess in a strange way, part of the work that I do is changing masculine into masculine. But that's not masculine as in I'm proving I'm male. For me, modern masculinity is all about authenticity. Whether you're male or female or whatever is going on, show up authentically. And for me, the object of the exercise, we also hold women's groups, or the women do, is to grow, to learn from each other's experiences and to grow. So there needs to be space for growth rather than control and Groundhog Day, same old story. And my addiction used to be survival. And through my survival addiction, I would only re-experience the same old thing. I would never allow anything new. And if I'm going to live within what I've already experienced, then I'm going to experience what I've already had and nothing else really.
That's very interesting, and I know that you also work with and not just men, but with women and other genders. It doesn't really matter what gender you are. I know that you work with everyone, but today I wanted to focus on men and this idea of modern masculinity as you described it. Can you maybe give us a sense for, what it means relative to the way men used to be? What has in fact changed? What has been the journey? What have you observed?
Do you know, recently I was in an interview and the guy who put International Men's Day, a friend of mine, asked me a question straight between the eyes. And it was the day that, who did Pirates of the Caribbean? Some famous actor.
Johnny Depp, is
Johnny
it?
Depp.
Yeah.
The day that Johnny Depp was named, and I think there was the court case, as an abuser. And I think it might have been the same day that Sean Connery died. And he said, okay, what have you got to say about men and these two men and masculinity? And for me, well, that's old-fashioned masculinity. And it was incredibly glamorized about being some sort of a bullying hero with more adolescent behavior. And it was more power over rather than in power and able to empower. And I would say one of the main differences for me between boys and men is boys need to prove masculinity and compete and not really listen to anything but make a big noise. Boys make noise. And this has got nothing to do with age. And it's got everything to do with perspective. Where for me, men include the feminine aspects. So we can respond rather than just react. We can listen rather than just making a noise. We can collaborate rather than needing to compete. And I would say a lot of people in fear will come from the child inside. So very often around a boardroom table, I'm speaking to little boys or little girls putting on a good show who have survived convent or boarding school or whatever it is that they've survived. And that's the part that I need to initially relate to, the fear part. And once we're on the same side, then we can really shift mountains together. Then we can really listen. Then we really know what's going on and everyone's included. And on the same side, we're creating something wonderful. When we're proving ourselves, then we're at odds with each other, hiding what's really going on and not really able to contribute to the situation in hand. And I would say lockdown has done this situation some favors, because a lot of people are on the edge with their mental health, with their situations, with their families, their friends, emotionally isolated, etc., etc. And the old-fashioned companies, it will still be put on a good show, prove that you're okay, prove that you can do the work, stay up all night, etc., etc. Where now, where people are on the edge, what I've noticed more, especially with the businesses that I work with, is I'm encouraging them to say how they are. Because then when people are healthy, they can do more. When someone's not healthy or exhausted or has insomnia or is on the edge, then they can be held by the team. And there is more space here for teamwork rather than I better prove myself and maintain my status within this pack.
So if I hear you correctly, then so the real change is in that modern masculinity or modern men are better at connecting with who they are inside, being authentic.
Yes, and I would say we now have the luxury of choice.
Hmm.
Where in the past, maybe we didn't have such a luxury
Hmm.
because it wasn't such an equal, listening, fair structure for us to operate within. Things have opened up and things are opening up. And I take it as my responsibility, same as the people I work with, that rather than saying, I don't like the way things are and I'm going to fight against it and it's not fair and I'm going to bitch about it, it's like, well, how do you want it to be? Well, feel that inside, express that outside and live it into being. And
Hmm.
I know in the men's groups and the women's groups and the corporate groups, it takes the first person to say something. This is how I feel, or I might be taking a risk with this thought or idea, or has anyone spotted this? And then the risk is taken, and then there's a greater depth.
Hmm.
And that's an invitation for everyone to meet there, should
Hmm.
they wish to. What
Hmm.
generally happens with my new corporate clients is it might take them one or two meetings before they respond in the meeting, but out of the meeting, they might speak with each other or speak with me to gently edge their way in. Am I allowed to say this? Is someone, it's like the kid in class who always asks the questions. And most of the kids in class who were too scared to put their hands up in case people laugh at them. And
Hmm.
everyone goes, thank God for the kid who asks all the questions because I had no idea what was going on.
Yeah.
And it's the same with, I feel overwhelmed with my work and this project. It's not landing. I need someone to spend 5 minutes with me just to talk it through, because maybe I can take it in listening. I need to be held by what's going on and spoon fed just for the day, or, just for now, because this is where I am. And then everyone is allowed to ask for help, collaboration, and we're in it together.
Hmm.
And the workplace can be so incredibly isolating and fearful. I mean, there are huge negatives with lockdown, and a number of people I know who are not computer operators, but they are operated by their computers, and they go to bed stressing about the emails. They wake up in the morning and before their eyes are open, it's like, oh my God, what's in my inbox? And it's doing the emails. And there's all this doing, 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 doing. If there's no space for the being, that doing's going to conk out. That doing's going to turn on people, and there's going to be some sort of a breakdown. And good management would be to listen to where people are, see where people are, and have a space to hear where people are so they can be met. And surely good management is knowing people, and bringing out the best in them so they can contribute this to their team. And this part can really flourish. And everyone has different gifts and experiences and education and perspectives to bring to the table if the table is made safe.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a minute, because I think, probably most of us, and not just men but women as well, would love to live the life, the true self, but more or less feel confined by societal pressures or expectations at work. And I think that men particularly bear the brunt of having to fit into some sort of an image. And I wanted to ask the audience as well, is to what extent do you still feel, if you're a man as a man, that you have to live up to a certain societal expectation at work? And as a woman, maybe that you have observed that kind of expectation in your work environment of, let's just say, the gender roles rather than just of men. So to what extent does your company still live up to what society expects men to be as? Let's see what the views are. And Inga, please do share with us when questions or observations come in.
Yeah, just coming back really there to your first question there as well, Rina, we saw that most people were actually, a lot of people were not even aware of International Men's Day, probably 1/3. And then probably about 2/3 were aware but didn't do anything. And 2 of our listeners actually did something, including one who did an event with you, Rina. So that's good. But also someone posted articles on their internal comms system and raised awareness of International Men's Day. And someone else hosted a talk with a speaker for all their employees. So only very few companies did something, right? Really interesting.
Yeah.
So we'd love to hear, did people recognize that there is still a lot of pressure on man?
So do you, if you feel, if you have, this is a great sharing now in the chat as well. I don't know if everybody saw it as it popped up. So if there are, what are some of the examples, maybe the specific examples that you come across that make you feel that there is an expectation of playing some sort of a role within your gender? Feed through some of those examples. And Kenny, can you share with us some of your observations on that? Have you seen?
And Matthew says the first question my boss always asks prospective male employees, and I mean prospective, right? So this is in the job interview. Do you like football? So that's interesting.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
So, two things were just on International Men's Day. We did, there were about, I think there were 5 of us from the Men Speak community, gave a talk and an experience to a large company about men in the workplace. And 2 things were uncovered that I feel are very rarely discussed.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess this is to do with the fear of the boy. And that goes into the workplace. And the first fear of the boy, whether it's in the new boy in class or not, is where do I put myself? Where do I fit in? And how do I take part without being abandoned or humiliated? How do I become part of the pack? And with this, to take this into the modern day workplace, it's how do I stay out of trouble? How do I not say something that's politically incorrect or insensitive or, and whatever it is, it's fear-based. So very often men will withdraw and not even enter a debate, leave alone an argument, for fear of being wrong, humiliated and put down. I feel it would be really important to remember that firstly, women's attention span, huge. My arms are not long enough. Men's attention span, and it's very in the moment. That's testosterone. And I would say one of the main differences, I mean, there's men and women, it's about masculine and feminine. But 2 things that can't be denied is we have different hormones. And I believe that most men are not as vulnerable going out in the street as women are, for example. So for men, it's like, well, I kind of think I get it, but I'd better not say anything or ask anything because then I'll be had. I'll be told off. I'll be told that I'm a vicious patriarch or a blah, 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 one of those nasty men that all men are scared of being. and Twitter loves to just, and so I mean, I don't use social media, but it feels like there's a barrage. Men are scared of this barrage of being told they are this, that, and the other. And I would say what a lot of men need is the space to be wrong and the space to get educated. And it might be the wrong words or terminology that comes out because of our attention span and getting a word in. And by no means am I saying that men can't get a word in, because I know men that speak, you know, like motor mouth, same as women. It's not about a male and female thing, but people like to talk and some people like to withdraw. But it's about, right, now's my time to say something. This is going to be done. I'm not going to do it. I'm too scared. So for me, it's listen and educate rather than put down, because it needs to be safe for us to come to the party and learn. And more than anything, unlearn, because how many generations have we had toxic male and bad behavior and cowboys and Indians and violence and, you know, all sorts of competitive, very often nasty boy behavior, saying this is how you need to be.
Sorry,
Very
Kenny, when you
often.
say cowboys and Indians, what sort of behavior? Can you clarify that, please?
Well, you know, I remember as a kid, don't want to be an Indian because we need to be the losers. We're going to be killed and we're a bit native. Meanwhile, the cowboys, well, we're cool and we have the guns and we can cause pain and harm. And the women are going to love us, especially if we're drunk and we mistreat them and we rule the world. So number one, I would say, is being scared to speak. Number two, which is a very strange one, and I'm not sure how, I mean, you're the experts in this field, how to open this up. The misunderstanding of sometimes when a man is passionate, people might feel he's being angry. And all it is like, I want to express myself. How can I include myself here? How can I be heard in a way that's true to me, in the way that I feel? Or do I need to pull this back and be small and appropriate? And then again, it's like, okay, I won't do it, or I'll do it, but I know there'll be consequences. So, you know, it's like, where do we put ourselves? And from a very, very young age, the old-fashioned parenting would be to humiliate, to withdraw from. And the most powerful man on the planet will generally crumble when a woman withdraws or criticizes or humiliates. And it could be another man, it could be a co-worker, but this abandonment, for me, the two big things that can rule a man are fear of abandonment and fear of humiliation. So I better keep quiet and I'd better behave. Meanwhile, I would rather there's space for everyone and everything. And we need to find the language and the common ground to really hear each other and have the patience to listen, educate and grow together.
Yeah, and thank you for that. I was just going to invite everybody to voice your views of what Kenny is saying. So you
so
agree?
really interesting point coming in there, Rena, which is actually what you've just described, Kenny, happens to women too. Someone's writing, especially Black women, they're seen as angry rather than passionate. And
That's
someone else, let me add that,
yeah.
Kenny, because then you can respond to both. I'm quite surprised by what Kenny is saying, and I can personally relate to that too. I've been in very few situations where men have pulled back and avoided showing passion, whereas I've watched women make themselves smaller. So maybe is it that we don't recognize, we women, how men make themselves smaller, or what's going on here? You see men make themselves smaller. We seem to see, or I and this person who's writing this for Yola and myself, see man taking up quite a lot of space. So what can you clarify?
For me, to be true, it is not about men or women for me. It's about masculine and feminine. And it's also about fear. And I so get this with especially Black women. It's not even women of color, because I don't think the finger is pointed in that way. I work with an organization called the Creative Collective. It's Words of Color, and it's about people of color in the media being represented and having our voice heard, and also the whole expression and the suppression and breaking the spell on what's going on. And it's ridiculous how fearful people can be of passion. It's ridiculous how prejudiced people can be of power, and it's tragic how the finger can be pointed at people because of the color of their skin and the noise that they make. And that can be very scary for some people. But I wonder how organizations can learn to include this, to listen to this, to feel behind what's really going on, rather than feeling uncomfortable about, well, I'm not used to this, therefore it's wrong. I'm not comfortable with this, therefore it needs to go away, or I need to go away. Or I'm going to quieten this down because it doesn't suit me. There is so much to be gained from all of these different cultures. Especially, I mean, I'm a refugee from Uganda, I've lived in Fiji. I know the strength and power of Black women, and I know the contribution that I've seen Black women make in business, and I respect that. I so respect that. And the same goes for working class white men, middle class Asian women, you know, whoever. There are different flavors and different experiences that everyone can bring. But can the organizations hold this? Well, maybe this needs to happen slowly, gently, carefully, rather than shum, it's in there and then it's out again. But inclusion, there is so much to benefit and there is so much to gain here.
So one of the questions that has come through on this very theme is that women. A lot about the gender movement, the gender balance movement, has been about women. Even though many of us, most of us, would say it's not just about women, but it has been. The focus has been women, and some of these women who chair women's networks have asked, how do we bring men in? And already we've identified that, while you're saying, Kenny, that a lot of men retreat and withdraw from conversation or from saying something out loud, women have not experienced that. They don't see it that way. So already there is a mismatch of behavior or expectation or understanding. So what would you say, and the same question to the audience if you want to give us your views, what can women do to invite and support men so that we can move forward together, Kenny, as you say? What can women's networks do?
I think Alan, can I say Alan is already sort of slightly answering that, so let's bring that in and then
go ahead.
Let's hear about Alan.
Yeah, he's saying the problem is that men and all their life experience is to be part of the dominant group, so they rarely have to question their behavior. So then, yeah, when they have to hold back their size and their perhaps being bigger, then awareness of that asks a lot of focus and work. It's not that they don't want to change or connect with themselves, they're just not aware. So yeah, how can women help man with holding back, or maybe being more what did you call it? That was great. Masculine, being more masculine in the right way.
I feel whether it's women including men or wanting more men in a female space or vice versa, it's about reflective listening. And I would say there are so many misunderstandings about what's going on. Very often a man might nod because he's listening. And then when because he's agreeing, where a woman might nod, and this is something that I've only recently learned, and I have no statistics behind this, a woman might nod because she's listening. Meanwhile, a man might think that he's agreeing with her, and therefore there is no more to be said because everyone's agreed. For me, reflective listening is to take the time when anyone's finished speaking to sum up in a breath. Are you saying blah, blah, blah? And then we know what's being said and we can build on that. And my God, the misunderstandings that come out straight away like that. And then we know we're moving forward together. There's also the demonization. A long time ago, what was this, the 90s? I used to go to when I had my marketing business, a networking event called the it was initially called Busy Girls at PricewaterhouseCoopers. And it was great fun, champagne and canopies. And I was one of the 1% of males there. And oh my God, it was embarrassing sometimes, the way that the women were, the men this and the men don't that. And so it went on. Very successful, very powerful, very accomplished women. And it was about 2 or 3 months later when a woman took the stage, and, you know, I'd shrink. I would be embarrassed to be male. It took a few months before a woman said, you know, I've listened to us for months. Now, hands up if all the women who have gone and said any of this to the man. And I'd say it works both ways. We need to communicate with each other and then reflective listen to each other. And then we know where we stand. And then we can move forward together. And I know women who are far more masculine than I'm sure I will ever be. And I know men who are far more feminine, you know, and that's the way it goes. And this is why it's individuals. I really don't believe it's men or women in this way. It's individuals. And the whole point for me with inclusion is we need to listen, ask if we don't understand, and include ourselves and include each other.
I think that's a really great point, because there's a sort of a famous cognitive bias, which is it's a bias that tells us that everybody else, let's say, is biased, but we are not. So we see everybody else differently from the way we are, and I think that's partly, I agree with you, partly the issue with a lot of this discussion around gender balance is that we're talking a lot and we're not listening enough. And so your points about, you know, first of all, the listening element, which to me is listening is one of our 8 inclusive behaviors. You have to really get good at it and want to do it. That's one thing. And also treating everyone as an individual, regardless of their gender. And nowadays, it's not just male and female. It could be anything in between as well.
Yeah.
So listening to that, I think that may be an entry point in bringing men into the conversation in the workplace. I'm just going to pause because there's been a lot of chit chat in the chat, and I want to just reflect on that as well.
Yeah, interesting. No questions, but a lot of statements. So this
Yeah.
is clearly a topic that people want to discuss rather than ask questions, right? So maybe we need to encourage men to get more comfortable with uncomfortable conversations and situations.
Absolutely.
Even just listening to women's experiences might make a difference. And I would like to add that goes both ways then, Kenny, is what you're saying, right? Listen to man as well.
But I would also say within our own genders, I mean, it's huge. Since lockdown, our check-in groups, we quite simply ask initially your name, so you take your space, how you feel right now, and what's up. And how you feel right now could be a life-changing question for some people, because maybe they've never been asked that, maybe they've never known how they feel, and maybe they're very rarely in the right now anyway. It's about the future or the past. So we're getting to know ourselves and where we are as men in a men's group and as women in a women's group. And then we can take ourselves out into the world. And the only reason we're separate in men's and women's groups is when I used to hold the women's groups, the women were just so honest and showed up, same at the men's groups. But when we put them, I expected the men to become little boys wanting mummies or flirts or daddies or whatever. I didn't expect similar behavior from the women, but everyone changed. The mixed groups work. It's so much more powerful separately. And some of the men are used to drinking sporting buddies. Some of the men are not used to any male people. A lot of the women get on wonderfully, but getting together, they really hit a depth about stuff that's rarely discussed, that needs to be just named so they can move beyond and be part of the sisterhood rather than kind of vaguely compete or compare in the sisterhood. So there's so much to be learned together as well as separately. But it's not we need to invite you, you need to invite us. It's we need to know ourselves and we need to unlearn whatever's in the way as individuals so we can all meet at the party.
Mm-hmm. Your point about there's more questions in the chat, but your point about the testosterone focused outlook on life versus the wider kind of gathering of concept, the old fashioned hunter and gatherer comparison. There is something there about potential sort of misunderstanding and how to deal with that situation.
Yeah.
So there is learning that needs to happen as well, about how men tend to communicate perhaps versus women, for instance. What would you say on that?
I feel embarrassed talking about this because my own wife has asked me, why have you suddenly become angry? Because she's helped me with my business at times, with accounts and bits and bobs. And I didn't quite understand. But all it was I turned from nice, playful, and kind of more heart connected into head, task, and do. And I've had this with other people. The switch from working with people to getting tasks done, I've been interpreted as angry. Meanwhile, a lot of the time, I'm actually excited and happy and so in, let's do this. This is such a great buzz. And it's like, I'm doing it wrong. And like I was saying, hormones, I am careful about what I do around a full moon and which clients I see and who and what's going to kick off around a full moon, because there are short fuses. There's a lot of creative energy that could be destructive unless it's known and harnessed and tapped into properly. So we have our, as I say, menstrual cycles, and there might be more arguments. There might be more yang type energy, and something that men are quite ignorant about generally, I would say, is female cycles and female hormones. And if we're not educated, if we're not let in, then we don't know. In fact, to be clearer about that, our ignorance, that's when the little boys in us will think, what have I done wrong? How do I fix this? And make it about themselves. Now, how can a bloke make somewhat a female hormones about something he's done wrong? That's messy. But information, and it's not necessarily the detail, it depends on your organization and your relationships, but to include something and to acknowledge and respect something rather than it being shamed or rather than it being hidden. And heaven forbid, I don't know how it is in the workplace these days or in society these days, but to write someone off because of hormones is ridiculous. This is a major, most natural part of life. And if we're not going to be educated about it, then it's going to get messy. Then there's an elephant in the room and everyone's pretending it's not there. Meanwhile, we're moving forward as if, everything is as usual. I think where we are and how we are, including grieving, there's so much ill health, there's death around. There's, one of my clients recently had a heart attack, and it was quite a shock to suddenly this guy who was just indestructible to go, and then stop. And now he's faced with, who am I? What really matters? And what's going on here? Meanwhile, I've heard of a situation from another company I work with where someone in the team had a heart attack, and the comment was, well, he wasn't cut out for the job, was he? That's not right.
Yeah. Lots of great observations in the chat as well. Inga, will you share?
Yeah, I'll summarize some because I want to get to some of the questions. So there's a lot of talk about, involving man in women's groups and making man part of the discussion and how hard that is actually, and whether that is, or how difficult that might be for man. But then the question comes, okay, so if the idea of masculinity is that it's all about having the idea of masculinity and how that is as toxic to man as it is to women. So what can an organization do to address that toxic masculinity just within the workplace?
I would say the first step is feedback. There's a guy called Marshall Rosenberg who wrote a book and a training, Nonviolent Communication. And on YouTube, there's a whole 3-4 hour course. It's basically 4 simple steps, and this is not doing it justice. The first step is when you raise your voice and talk so directly. I feel scared, I feel upset, I feel judged. I need to know that I'm respected, and that I'm valued in this team. Would you be willing to tell me whether you are angry or whether you're trying to communicate something else? Or would you be willing to tell me how I'm doing? Give me some feedback. So it's breaking it down and it's unenmeshing it. It's not you made me feel, I'm a victim too. It's none of that. It's when you naming the behavior. So it's naming it, not judging it. I feel, owning the feeling. I need, so state the need rather than making that a guessing game and hinting at it, because probably no one will get the hint. And then there's the request. Now, when this first came out a long time ago, I remember doing the training and being surrounded by the most incredibly passive aggressive people who used it to control each other. And then I learned that the first step needs to be connection. And when there's connection, it works a treat. And it might be a little cumbersome initially, but my God, it's so efficient and it's so clear. And it gives every individual the space to be and to express and to be heard.
And if you can share that resource with us, sorry. Yeah, we'll send it around afterwards. I just wanted you to share this with everyone who's listening so that they can follow up on that. Yeah, go ahead, Inga, sorry.
Yeah, is there anything practical organizations can do? Starting conversations. So what do you do if you are an HR manager or a diversity director? What action can you take apart from having one-on-one conversations yourself, where you do this reflective listening and encourage man to take off the mask? Is there anything else you can do?
On International Men's Day, the reason they were, I think it was 4 or 5 of us, giving the talk, is we wanted to break out into separate rooms to give the people in this organization an experience of a very basic check-in. And it was about 20 minutes. And it was very simply your name, how you feel right now, and what's going on. In my room was the HR manager who said, well, I'm in a very difficult situation because I need to be separate from everyone and people will put on a good show and blah, blah, blah. And so it went on. It's like, I can't do this because it will jeopardize my position. And a lot of people felt that. But as soon as the first person said, well, actually, I feel stressed because I'm trying to sell my house and it hasn't come through. And then the next one said, well, my mother's ill. And it wasn't a huge outpouring. But these people generally knew each other and liked each other, but they didn't really know each other. And they didn't know they were allowed to let each other in even just a little bit. So for me, it's humanize, especially when we're on the edge, especially when it's going dark. There's a full moon, there's lockdown. It's the end of it's chaos. We're going to look back at this period in time and go, oh my God, do you remember that chaos? How did we survive that? This is the time to connect. This is the time to care. This is the time to show up. It's not about showing off anymore. It's more important than that. This is the time to show up and listen and break the spell and be in it together. I can actually send you a video of a check-in that we did and we videoed. So then people have an experience and can see what we did.
Yes, and something that I'd love to hear from the audience, whether you have, something like men's group in your organization or have participated in anything that has inquired into the men's state of mental health in particular. So do share with us if that's been the case, because in my experience, that's still quite rare. There's virtually a women's group or similar in every organization that I have worked with, but I have come across maybe 2 or 3 of men's groups alone, and that's not enough, I think. So that's something definitely diversity managers can instigate and encourage.
I don't know whether this is true of women, but I would say men can fear men. I'm not going to be in the in crowd. Or men can upstage men. I need to show that I'm the expert here. I'm the alpha here. The way that we very simply formatted this is a way of just everyone's equal. There's no space for that. It doesn't work that way. But again, I'll give you a link so you can have some free resource and ways of experimenting with this. But it's generally the men who won't come because there's fear and there's competition. But to see this and to experience this might be a game changer.
Yeah. That would be really good, actually, to try and address a lot of just shifting to the next question that's come in before, and do continue to ask questions if you have them. Is simply this: what do men want versus what perhaps women want? And I invite you again in the audience, put down what you think you want as a man. Or as a woman, but specifically to you, Kenny, what do men want? What do they want?
Speaking on behalf of half the population of the
Exactly.
planet,
Speak on behalf of half the population.
which I do feel qualified to do, with an answer like love. It's really as simple as that. The thing that breaks the spell is connection. The tragedy is, for whatever reason, media, family, religion, class, we're told we're not good enough. And in order to be good enough, you need to do this, have this, look like this, act like this, like this. How many boys, how many men do I know that said, I have no interest in football, but I knew I had to learn it and pretend I like it from a very young age, otherwise I'll be left out. I would say that men and women need love, need connection, need acceptance, need respect, need to be heard, not to be abandoned or humiliated. And that's tragic. The fear of abandonment, the fear of humiliation. And what I so often say is Instagram and God knows what else, is when I look like this and have this and whatever it is, then I'll be good enough to connect. And I always say, it's not about your money. It's not about your muscles. It's not about your monkeying about and putting on a bad show. Get all of that aside and connect now.
Mm-hmm. It's a connection, and all you need is love. Is that right? What else? I mean, do people agree with that?
Yeah, let's get bring some people in. Viola says we do an intersectional analysis of our mental health data so we can see if particular groups are struggling. So that obviously includes men's group. Someone says, I've participated in quite a few of the men's speak groups and groups with Andy's Men's Club. So there's something going on there. When we started a women's group, we had outrage from some guys that this existed, recognize that. But when we asked how we can support them with starting a group, nothing came back. Not sure how we can best start on that. Kenny, is that something you can respond to?
Paranoia. I've been holding the groups 20 years now, and now they're a lot more accessible, where in the early days, it's, well, you're either a cult or you're gay or you're Christian or there's something funny going on. In the last few years, it's got a lot better. It's, do you get together and bitch about women? No. And the same goes both ways. It's like there will be paranoia. And this is fear rather than love. And the object of the exercise is moving from fear into love. And the most grounded, practical way, as far as I'm concerned, is information. Ask questions, listen, maybe reflective listen, and agree on next steps as an experiment, and then reevaluate, but move forward together.
Yeah, and that answers the next question. How do you put connection and all you need is love into an D&I strategy? So by reflection, right? By encouraging reflection. And would you agree there, Kenny?
And also being careful about your language, because the language needs to be inclusive. I'm speaking to a screen full of people. If I was around a boardroom table and we were dressed to the nines, then I might use very, very different language. But with this screen, in my lounge, I can use my language. But what is the language of your community? Because it's up to you to use the language that's appropriate to include everyone, and then gently open it up, because everything needs to belong to the people that you serve, not to the organization, not to the loudest voice or the biggest victim, but everyone. And unless, before we start the groups, men's, women's, whatever, we have a set of ground rules. Before we start the group, everyone either agrees to the ground rules or changes the ground rules. And everyone has the right to change the ground rules, because then the ground rules belong to everyone. And we agree. It's not about this is inflicted on you. It's about, shall we meet here?
Yeah, lots of people agreeing with the love and acceptance is what man wants. And then someone saying, yes, love is the changer. Vulnerability is superpower. So that vulnerability, creating a safe space where man and women can be vulnerable. Can you say something about that, Kanye? Is that linking to what you're saying?
Yeah, it's vulnerability is power. And the other night I was in a men's group with two very, very different men. Well, there were a dozen of us, but these two men were in exactly the same place of, how can I be a man? And vulnerability is the enemy. One of them was this huge, burly bloke who was into his sports and his violence and his drinking and everything else. And the other one was a much smaller, more gentle man, who was mainly influenced by his grandmother, because the mother was very masculine and alcoholic. The father was very feminine and guilty, and neither of them made much sense. What they had in common was they were stuck in the same place in their pubescence with, who do I need to be to survive life? And they gained information. You know, the masculine one was from the lads. This is how to be a man. Well, what do lads know about how to be a man? They know how to be lads, but no one was there to show him or to even demonstrate, or in his environment, of how to be a man. And same with the other guy. Totally different, but their masculinity and femininity, but in exactly the same place. And it was incredible for them to look at each other, where they probably would be scared or uncomfortable with each other, passing each other in the street, to go, oh my God, we're in exactly the same place. And we have no idea who we are or how to be us, rather than how to do us right. And the tragedy, men's groups, women's groups, is people showing up and saying, well, how do I do me right? What's wrong with me? And there's never anything wrong with anyone. And it's not about what they're doing. It's about who they are. How do I let go of who I no longer need to be? And how do I show up and have space for my being and extend my doing from there? Because if it's not an extension from the being to the doing, and it's the other way around, then people are showing up with, am I? Am I safe? Am I putting on a good show? Am I good enough? And all the power is given out rather than I am. I have an idea who I am, and whoever I no longer need to be, I can let go of. And from that alignment, I can engage with other people. So when people come from fear and putting on a good show, there's generally no space for anyone. It's just a bad show and a guessing game. But when people show up and include themselves, then everyone can be met and everything can move forward. And it does just take the first person to take the tiniest risk, and then everyone has permission.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's the courage element. We're coming to an end, and I want to ask you one more question. I will pose you the question, and then maybe we can check in with Inga for some more of the comments that have come in. So we've talked a lot about different things that you can do as an individual, as somebody who facilitates diversity and inclusion. We talked about the things that we all have in common: love, connection, vulnerability, having a career that's purposeful, that's fulfilling. All those things are important to all of us, and more, I'm sure. If you were to sum up the most important takeaway from this session for people, what would that be? And before you answer, let's just check in. You can think about it for 2 minutes while I check in with Inga for the chat.
Yeah, lots of interesting things there, Rena. So I think, I don't know if Kenny has time, but if we have like 10 minutes to stay on after the official session, maybe we can have more of the conversation that is going on here, because a key question in there is, how do you convince men that they even need a men's group when they don't think anything is wrong? Someone else saying we just have the boozing thing at work, or we used to have the boozing thing at work, but nothing else. So, I mean, there's this...
I would love to address those two. I'm so aching to address those two.
If you've asked the question and you want to stay on, please do. I know if you have to go, absolutely do go. But if you want, we will stay for another 10 minutes for Kenny to address it. But first, go ahead. What is the one takeaway?
For me, it's about where you're coming from inside. It's about your own perspective. We all have the power to choose where we're coming from inside. And if the influence and the addiction is the outside, then take a breath and start to exist and adjust on the inside. If the work that you do is totally in alignment with your passion and your purpose, wonderful. If it's not, wonderful. It really doesn't matter, because it's about who you are inside and how you express yourself. And purpose can change. My purpose has changed over the years. Passion is there when I'm in alignment and I know that I come alive when I'm on the edge, not when things are tootling along and I'm totally in control and everything's wonderful. That's kind of like, it's okay, it's safe, and it's a bit pointless. And that doesn't mean I need a life on the edge, but I need to feel alive. I need to take part. So it depends on where I come from inside. And I can be a volcano waiting to erupt on the inside. And if I'm in a gentle situation with gentle people on the outside, then it's up to me to relate to them and communicate with them. And communication for me is, it's my responsibility that they understand and I include them, rather than their responsibility to try and figure out what my noise is about.
Okay. So takeaway is connect with who you are inside and bring that person out. Become that person.
Or even just hold that person.
Hold that person, yeah.
And whatever can come out, let that come out. But, you know, be yourself, in alignment with yourself, and take that to every party.
Yeah.
And the easiest way of knowing who you are, I have found for myself, is letting go of who you no longer are. Being the leftovers is so much more efficient than trying to figure it out and then buying it and then inflicting this package on other people, because it's going to be limiting as soon as you've thought about it anyway.
Yeah. So people are dropping off. Thank you very much for coming along. Thank you, Kenny, as well, for giving us a tour of modern masculinity in an hour, which is obviously cannot be long enough to do it all justice. Be sure to tune in to the last expert interview of the year, which will be on addressing breaking the barriers in bringing in ethnic minorities into the workplace, and that's taking place next in December on, what's the date? Is it the 9th? 26? No, that's not the 9th, 26th. You'll get an email about that, but it's in December, and please do come along. The 10th, that's it. 9th, the
with
10th.
Deloitte, right? So that'd be great. What has Deloitte been doing to break barriers for diversity?
Yes, with we have a guest speaker from Deloitte for that session. That'll be fantastic. So thank you again. If you want to stick around and hear Kenny answer those two questions, please do. And otherwise, and I'm going to switch off the recording as well, or you should, Inga.
Or leave it for the questions.
Or leave it for the questions. Okay, yeah, fantastic. Thanks very much. And okay, over to you, Kenny. Do we want to repeat the questions? Or
yeah. Let's do the questions again, one by one.
Yeah. Oh, let me go back because they're a bit further back. Oh, it was about what if man don't want those man's groups? You know, how can you convince them to that one is needed, or that they need to start talking about toxic masculinity or open up?
So the difference between you need this to it might be nice is the difference. There's something wrong with you and we're going to fix it is You know, this is slugs and snails and puppy dog's tails. That's what little boys are made of. So you're wrong, you're bad, you need to go there and get fixed. That's not very attractive, but let's hang out and talk about something. We want to explore something. That's an invitation, and it's probably truer.
Yeah, and the other point was we do have men's groups, but they're really only just boozing in the pub. You know, what would you say to that? And obviously they're saying they're not happy with this, right?
Yeah, that's been so interesting during the check-in groups, is so many men have showed up and said, I thought I had it good because I had my workmates, and after work we'd get drunk and blah, blah, blah. And now I realize what a waste of time that was, and how horrible I felt with the hangover, and how shallow it was, and all I needed was to belong and take part in something, but it doesn't work for me. Now, poor blokes didn't have anywhere to go before. And in the men's groups, quite simply, we hang out and we talk about whatever's up, and we laugh a lot as well. It's good, bad, and ugly. So a lot of the time, men don't have the opportunity. Where do you meet men to hang out with some depth and explore what matters? It's just not that normal these days. It's not that available. There are also a lot of men who over the years have come to the groups and said, well, I have my drinking mates, and I have my sports mates, and I have my this mates and that mates, and none of them really know me, but it's kind of good fun, and I've known them forever, and this is what I've got. But I'm really lonely, and I don't know how to do life better, and I need to be met, and you know, so I think I'll bring me here, but I don't want to take anything there in case they think I'm weird and I lose them. So it's not either or, it can be both. But what generally happens is a man gently grows into who he is, and he naturally takes some of that into his communities, and people change. So it's not get fixed, it's more grow into who you are and naturally, organically spread it with your friends, your family, your community, your children, your whoever. And that for me is the magic of it. It's just turn into who you are. And it might be scary the first time. I mean, this is why we've done a few recorded groups so people can see. And we're on Zoom now. And it's never happened. But if there's a man who shows up and is scared, then it's like out. Now that's safe. One of our ground rules is, well, two of my favorite ground rules. One is play bigger than the rules. It's not about being small and being light. It's about playing big and finding out who you are and being met at the edge and getting some feedback. And the other one is you can say pass at any time. So there is no pressure whatsoever. And pass is respected.
So someone's saying here, great question to add to that. Love it is, but how about these low values of survival, which show themselves in competition and need of power?
The low values of survival?
Yeah, the low values of survival that in masculinity that are all about competition, being in need of power. So how do you, I suppose the question sort of is, how do you move that conversation to
I love this question. I'm blown away at how easily since lockdown men have picked this up, because the survival instincts are up. The fear is up. Oh my God, how am I going to fix this? And what I say is the first step is to take a deep breath and get here and now. Get out of the head, get into the body, get out of panic, and get present here and now. The next step might be to follow the feeling back in a breath. Where does this panic, where does this survival take you? And since lockdown, well, I started the daily check-ins because I was in lockdown a few days. I went into isolation a few days before we went into lockdown because someone that I work with had the symptoms. And I noticed that I was checking out of the window, expecting to see the military, and I was expecting to hear gunfire, because when we were, I'm a refugee from Uganda, when there was curfew, there was military on the streets, and we did hear gunfire, so I was triggered. So men came to the groups and I got them to do the same, And it was straight into boarding school, being locked in a room, abuse, whatever it is that happened to them. That's where they were reacting from. So what I've told them to do is, okay, so you know what's going on. Now that's not happening here and now. And that's not happening to the man in you here and now. But there's a boy in you that's stuck in that place. Now the man in you, when you breathe, you're out of your head and you're present. And the man in you can say to the boy in you, it's okay, I'm here. And then the man in you can meet life and respond. What has generally happened is no one gets to see the man, and there's a protecting part that will perpetuate and attract things to keep surviving. This is a very simplistic way of how to turn survival into living, but it really is, when that child is safe, there isn't a traumatized protector trying to protect a vulnerable child, but there is a safe child with a man. Finally, there is an adult taking care of this child. So there's no frenzy with the protector, and this adult part can meet life.
Wow. Any other questions, Inga? I didn't see, there was a conversation about in the chat room about how might one join a men's group if you live outside London or where there isn't one. And I think what we'll do, Kenny, is share the details of your men's group as well, which is obviously on Zoom now, you said?
Yeah, they're all on Zoom and people come in from all over the world. After lockdown, there will be a lot of people around the country who are holding men's groups for other people to join, and we provide all the resources so people can start their own groups, the free resources, the ebook. I do a one-day training first Saturday of the month, and we've set up so many, or helped to set up so many men's and women's and other groups all over the world. So very, very happy to help.
That's fantastic. I think that would be
Last
fantastic.
question there from Benson Hoy, and then we'll finish. It's been a great discussion, Kenny. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Benson Hoy asking, I can sense a lot of influence of Marshall Rosenberg in your speech, who is, of course, the author of Nonviolent Communication. Would you be willing to share who has been your second most important inspiration figure?
Do you know, to be frank, I think I made it up myself. I had to. I mean, I was riddled with mental health issues after my post-traumatic stress disorder. I used to twitch and grunt. I had Tourette's, obsessive compulsive disorder, body dysmorphia, God knows, trichomania. I had all of these things going on. And I had to unlearn them, learn to calm myself down. And I've made up so many of my tools myself to save my life. And, you know, how old am I? 56 now. And in my childhood and early life, these things didn't exist. They were just embarrassing and inconvenient. So I've had to unlearn things myself. And Marshall Rosenberg came along in probably 10 years ago or something. But there are some incredible influences around, depending on where you are and what's going on. And I love to recommend books and movies depending on where a person is. But there isn't one specific. I wish it was that easy for me, you know, a manual, how to be a man manual.
If there is anything, yeah, if you come across something, it'd be a great resource to share with others as well. There is, of course, a lot of writing, as you say, about men now and how to become more the modern man, or understand women more, dare I say it.
And I must admit that I think most of the stuff out there is shockingly rubbish.
Well, there you go. Don't read any of it. Just pick up one of Kenny's books.
Well, it's how to be you and how to share you, not how to understand who the enemy is and how to manipulate them. That's just so old-fashioned, and it just doesn't work. It's empty. And who wants to be with anyone that falls for that kind of nonsense?
Yeah. But in any case, we will share your details and the men's groups, and maybe there is some, as you say, resources, free resources that people can take advantage of and form their own men's group. For now, I just want to very much thank you for a fantastic conversation. Lots of great views and commentary that we've brought into the room. It's been a great participation. We've also had great participation from men, which is quite rare for me in my line of work, which is, so I thank you for that.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it's been really good. And thank you very much for taking the time, and hopefully we'll see you here again.
I'd love to. Thank you. It's been
Thank you.
great.
Thanks a lot, and thanks to everyone. Take care. We'll see you next month.
Bye.
Bye.